Hi, I'm Kirby Allison, and for years now, I've been exploring the world of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition. This journey has taken me from some of the world's most highly regarded bespoke tailoring houses, all the way to a proper shooting estate in Scotland. I've come to believe that nobody does tradition better than the British. From dressing in the proper attire for a given occasion, through the liturgy of the ceremonial, there is always an etiquette at its core. The traditions of dressing properly, the traditions of the country pursuits, the traditions of British ceremony. But in today's video, we explore what could be one of the most exciting of the British traditions, racing. I've been invited by my good friend James to join him as he prepares to race his 1959 Tojero in the Goodwood Revival, arguably the world's most renowned vintage racing event. So strap in and enjoy as we experience Britain's golden era of racing. Nestled somewhere in the quiet English countryside, a little outside London, a team of exceptional craftspeople are diligently working away in preparation for an upcoming festival. But this isn't just any festival, and this isn't just any team. The Goodwood Revival is the world's preeminent event for vintage car racing, and my friend James Cottingham, along with his team from DK Engineering, are not exactly your normal car mechanics. To understand a little bit more about the Goodwood Revival, I'm meeting James at DK Engineering's headquarters to get a better idea of what it is they do and how it is they do it. And James.
Kirby, great to see you. I'm so glad you could finally get here as well.
Well, it's great to finally make it out here. I mean, of course, you've told me so much about this beautiful facility, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, good. And I've got something really exciting to show you. So let's go and have a look straight away. So here we are in one of our main showroom facilities. And in here it's typical of the variety that we have. Mainly modern today, but we have a Bugatti EB110 Supersport, the only right-hand drive example in the world. A tailor-made F12 TDF, so of a few years ago, the ultimate front-engine V12. And then of course, the LaFerrari, one of only three cars in blue Pozzi, which is that fantastic flat dark blue.
That's a beautiful color. So this is 20 years of automotive kind of progression right in this room at the peak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Supercars.
Absolutely. I mean, in the mid-90s, the Bugatti was the pinnacle. It was four-wheel drive. It was quad turbo, V12. It was completely ahead of its time.
Completely analog.
Yeah, and only 32 cars were built before Artioli, the owner of Bugatti, an Italian, because it became an Italian-owned company for a while, went bankrupt because he put too much money into these cars.
This car.
So that especially in recent years, there's been such a big resurgence in interest in them. And then, of course, Ferrari with their limited editions, they've really hit home with what people want and what they want to have, the latest and greatest, but limited numbers.
Yeah.
And then starting with the 288 in the 80s, you had that as the original supercar, I think. And Ferrari, invented the supercar as I see it. And then after that, they had the F40, the F50, the Enzo, and then the LaFerrari. And this is one of those.
And this one has a hybrid kind of system in it.
Yeah, so it's still a traditional V12 naturally aspirated engine, but with that hybrid addition for extra torque and power. And actually, you can drive these in full electric mode, not for very far, but it's quite a good
Out
gimmick.
of the driveway?
Yeah. So, then we'll wander through to the next room.
Yeah.
So this is our main display area, if you like, the main showroom. And it's very typical of what we do at DK these days, which is diversity and variety, as we mentioned already. So there'll always be a few modern cars in here, a few older cars, and a selection of our stock in this showroom, and then the balance of our stock in our 4 other showrooms, which we'll move on to after this.
And so how does it work? I mean, it's a pretty broad repertoire of vehicles that you guys are sourcing. I mean, the expertise to, span really the entire scope of automotive history, I'm sure presents challenges.
Yeah, sure. I mean, our speciality is Ferrari. So 75 to 80% of the cars that you'll see here will be Ferrari. But as we can provide a complete service for clients, whether it be racing, whether it be servicing, whether it be advice on a purchase, whether it be selling a car on behalf of a client, with that collector comes other cars. Yeah. So over the years, you'll find that whilst a collector may have 10 cars in his collection and 7 of them are Ferraris, there'll be a few Porsches or a Bugatti or something like that. And so as a result of that experience gained by us when we've helped handle those cars, you tend to have similar examples dotted around the premises. So you'll see in storage, 30% of the cars will be other brands, and the same with sales. So often it's cars that a client has asked us to sell on their behalf, or something that we, have taken a fancy to that's just a little bit different to the norm. Because I think if we focus just primarily on Ferrari and nothing else, we're going to limit ourselves. Whereas we like to be able to offer this service that is unlimited, and we can offer an opinion on everything. In order to do that, we've got to have a go at it every now and again. So that's why you'll see different brands here.
Yeah, I mean, so often whenever I think of, vintage automobile sales, I think of the auctions, right? I mean, you've got Christie's, Bonham, Sotheby's. Where does a firm like DK, play in that ecosystem, and how do you guys offer a different, product or service or approach towards the buying and selling of these incredibly rare, inexpensive automobiles?
I think an auction house, they operate very much from one auction to the next. So their focus will be on their next sale and getting everything together for a particular car or consigning a particular car to that auction. Whereas with us, it's much longer term. These collections that we're building for clients, whether they be 5, 10, 15, 20 cars, we're going to have an interaction with that client and with his collection for hopefully 10, 20, 30, 40 years plus. And many of our initial clients back from 1975 are still our clients today.
Really?
For us, it's the longer term. It's making sure that we really dig down into the history of the cars. We might restore a car for a client, which is a 2-year process. So with that comes a lot of research and making sure the cars are perfect and working with that car. And once it's finished, then there's the events to go and do afterwards. And subsequently, years later, we may end up selling the car. And when we come to sell that car, we can tell people about our involvement with it right from the very start of its acquisition by the current owner, its restoration, all those different things.
So you can really speak to the provenance of the specific vehicles.
100%. And especially with the Ferraris, the cars that you'll see dotted around in storage, in service, in restoration, we will probably have a relationship that goes back with that particular car longer than the client itself. And often they might go away and then they'll come back. So for example, a car we have here today that's going to the States, it's just been sold, that's been in the UK since the early 70s. I'm sure in 10 years' time, we might see that car again when it comes back to us for work or maybe even to be sold again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in many ways of the same way with kind of, with Simon, a mutual friend, at Henry Poole or Lob. I mean, the enthusiast culture that you have behind kind of bespoke tailoring and bespoke shoemakings. I mean, at the end of the day, here at DK, you're ultimately dealing with an enthusiast. And that enthusiast, goes to you for the expertise, right? But they also go for you for the experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, it comes back to this circle of life. These cars come back to us and people will say, even if we haven't sold it to them or we haven't helped them purchase the car, they'll say, I've just bought this car and you guys saw it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you restored it 30 years ago. Can you help me fill in the blanks?
Yeah. But that, so take for instance, Goodwood, where we're going to this weekend. That experience, right, is so much a part of the customer journey that you guys help embellish. Is that right?
Absolutely. And sometimes someone will say, this is my ambition, this is my aim, this is my target. I want to go to Goodwood, I want to race in this race, the Sussex Trophy or the TT or the Stirling Moss Trophy, whatever it may be. And we help them on that journey, from getting their race license in the first place to buying the car that will take them to Goodwood, to them hopefully winning the race at Goodwood.
And not seeing the vehicle back because, it was taken into the barriers.
Well, yeah, hopefully. It's very rare that happens.
Here we are. Wow, so is this the car you're going to be racing this weekend?
So we've got two cars here that are just getting ready for departure today. This is the Tojero Jaguar, ex-Securia Cost 1959 Le Mans entry, Goodwood TT in 59 as well. This is the car that I'll be racing in the Sussex Trophy this weekend. But just by coincidence, here is a fantastic Jaguar D-Type that we've just sold. So in terms of British racing cars, there is nothing more iconic than a long-nosed Jaguar D-Type with a tail fin. They only built 12 in period. Half of those were works cars, half of them were customer cars. This car is the best there is in the world in terms of its racing success and its originality.
Yeah.
So out of those 12 cars built, really only 6 can claim to still exist.
Yeah.
And this car did Le Mans 4 times. So 1956 as a works car, then as an Securia Cost entry, 57, 58, 59. In 1957, it finished second overall. And it's had very few owners during its life. 2 very long-term owners. The most recent chap had it for 10 years, and we've just sold the car to a new owner, a young gentleman from the USA.
Oh, really?
So it is going to the USA today.
Wow.
It's going to be flown over the weekend. So pretty sad to see it go, but for us, a really significant, important sale, and a reflection of, again, what we do here.
Yeah.
Interestingly as well, these 2 cars, they were both Securia Cost cars and would have been teammates at Le Mans in 1959. And so it's quite a nice opportunity to have the cars together.
I wonder how long it's been since these 2 were together.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, there's probably been a few Securia Costs, gatherings of cars, but to actually have them side by side like this, not for a long time.
And this really speaks to, the breadth of kind of services that you offer here at DK. I mean, not just the acquisition and sale of these absolutely incredible vintage automobiles, but the servicing of them and the preparation for them to actually race again, and then the experience of racing at an event like Goodwood.
Of course, yeah, and time and time again you'll hear me talking about the circle of life for these cars, and how they come and go and they come back around. And this car in the early 2000s, it's a car that we've known for 40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
But in the early 2000s, we actually ran this car at Goodwood.
Really?
For the owner at that time.
Owner,
so not the most recent owner, but the owner before. We ran it for him, so we know the car very well. So it's quite nice that it's come back to us to be sold and that we've sold it on. We found the new owner for the car, and he's absolutely the right fit for it. But again, turning to the Tojero, it's a real reflection of why we founded the business. My father was very into racing his cars and enjoying them. And I think that, again, an almost unique proposition with regards to DK Engineering is that we are active owners and participants in concours events, racing events. And, here we are this weekend, we'll be at the Goodwood Revival, hopefully, battling for the podium in our own Tojero Jaguar. And so when someone comes to us saying, this is what I'd like to do, or this is what I'm looking for, the advice that we give is firsthand.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not our opinion. It really is our experience.
Yeah, and you've lived it. I mean, this company really grew out of your father's passion for vintage vehicles.
Exactly. So, really proud to sort of be able to take this to Goodwood, but also to show you this car that we've just handled.
I mean, how incredible to see these 2 together, right?
Indeed.
How did you decide on the Tojero for Goodwood?
Well, do you know, it was...
I'm not exactly familiar with how the process goes that determines what you're able to drive.
It was an opportunity.
Okay.
I was at an auction in 2013. There was a gentleman called Dick Skipworth who had actually amassed a collection of Securia Cost racing cars and their transporter from the period.
Oh, really?
And he'd decided that he'd got to an age where he wasn't going to race anymore. So in the auction, he had the transporter and about 4 or 5 of his ex-Securia.
Package deal?
No, they were sold off lot by lot. And there was an ex-Securia Cost E-Type, not a long nose, but a short nose. There was a C-Type, there was a midget, the Tojero, the racing transporter, as I mentioned. And I was there with my father, and it's a car that we've known for a long time and we've seen racing. And I believe that this car has raced at every single Goodwood Revival that it could race at, which out of the revivals, there's probably only been a couple of occasions where there isn't a race for it. So it's always been there because it's a totally unique car. As I mentioned, it ran at Le Mans in 59 and it did the Goodwood TT in 59 as well, driven by Jim Clark and Maston Gregory. And Jim Clark, this is the only Securia Cost car he actually ever drove. So we were at the auction and one of the lots before, one of the other Akira Cost cars had just made a big price. What often happens at auctions is that when there's a car that sells for a big price, the car in the lot afterwards always suffers because everyone's talking and the auctioneer's trying to get on with it. And I was standing there with my father, and it wasn't making the sort of money that it should make. And I thought, well, what a tremendous opportunity. So we put our hand up, and the next thing we knew, we were the owners. So we've had the car for nearly 10 years and have continually campaigned it. It's always had a bit of a reputation for being a tricky car to drive, which it is actually a tricky car to drive, but we've got the car set up now, and we had it restored to a specification that is, making the most of its design merits and almost dialing out the negativities of its design. So we're really hoping that we can get it on the podium again.
Yeah. What goes into preparing a vehicle like this to be pushed so hard? I mean, if you're actually racing it, you're pushing the vehicle to its original limits, which were at the cutting edge of the time. I mean, so this vehicle right here, I mean, pushing almost 70 years. I mean, what's involved in, getting a vehicle like this ready to actually be driven like that?
The one thing about the historic racing scene, and 50 sports cars in particular, which is why I've always loved 50 sports cars when I was a youngster, this is what I deem to be the original historic racing car.
Yeah.
So in the 60s, when these cars were 10 years old, this is the first historic race series that people started to compete and participate in with 50 sports cars. So for me, I've always loved a 50 sports car from its basic design and that sort of stuff. But we have what's called eligibility and HTP papers, which will dictate the specification the car was built to originally. So you have to stay within that. Generally, the performance boost is when these cars are rebuilt, that, the 0.5% here and the 0.5% there in terms of improving the way in which something's put together, or the edge of the design is perfected. That the combination of all those incremental improvements creates a great racing car. And that's what's really important. And also when it comes to ongoing maintenance and making sure that, as you say, it's a 70-year-old car, so that the suspension, that the wishbones are crack tested, that the engine is regularly inspected, that the engine is not built to a specification that it will only last one race, that it can do 1 or 2 seasons, but that when it needs to be checked, even if it's not broken, it needs to be overhauled and checked, because you are driving these cars to their limit. And the same goes for all of the components within the car. It's that regular maintenance, and it's making the right decisions in terms of how things are done, when they're done, and by who.
Did your father know the 9th Duke of Richmond?
Yes, of course. Yeah. I mean, going back to the early days of the event, we were, I was very young at the time, but we went to the first Goodwood Festival of Speed, and we had 2 cars there, 2 Jaguars, funnily enough, not Ferraris, but we had a magnesium-bodied XK120 that my father owned at the time, that he had repurchased, that he had owned when he was 21.
Really?
And a low-drag, lightweight E-Type that he also owned at the time with a friend, and we had both of those cars there. And I was there, and I remember it was very wet, and it was not many hay bales and posts with rope between, and it was just guys having fun up the Duke's Drive. And to watch Charles and what he's done with the estate, until his father passed, and since then, it is incredible to look at that Goodwood estate and to see how he has not only brought it to today's day and age when it comes to corporate sponsorship and the involvement of big manufacturers, but keeping that iconic British atmosphere. And I say to a lot of clients, you have to go to the Goodwood Revival, especially to their wives, because they just think it's going to be boring in cars. But the truth is, you can go to the Goodwood Revival for 3 days and not actually watch a car race, and still lap it up and enjoy the atmosphere and the 60s feeling of it.
I'm really looking forward to attending Goodwood for the first time and being able to see you race.
I can assure you as well, your mind will be blown, not only by the atmosphere and the attention to detail, but the way in which the racing is, goes about, or the way in which people go about the racing. It's door handle to door handle. It's not rubbing, but it's door handle to door handle, and it is really proper racing. So you're going to love it.
Proper gentleman's race. Well, can we see the garage? I mean, it'd be really fascinating to see how these vehicles are actually restored.
Absolutely, let's have a wander onto the workshops.
Thank you.
After you.
More candy.
So this is what we call a handover bay.
Okay.
And generally this will be for cars that we have recently sold, or we've completed work on, or again are waiting for collection, or have just arrived, in fact, and just waiting for a slot in the workshop. So first up, that's a F50. So
Yeah.
something in recent years, especially over the last 20 years, that we've really come to specialize in is the F car.
Yeah.
So the 288, the F40, the F50, the Enzo, the LaFerrari. And in the last year alone, we've sold close to 10 F50s.
No kidding.
So we've been very active in that market. And this particular car belongs to an owner that's had it for a very long time. And as the values have grown, he's seen that it's probably a good idea for him to spend a bit of money on the car just to bring it up to concourse standard. So it's a very nice car, and it is a very nice car to start with, but it just shows its age. It shows that it's 25 years old at the edges. You know, some of the suspension is starting to peel paint, and some of the water pipes where they've got hot and cold, they've done the same. So we will completely strip that car and sensitively and delicately clean it and put it back together and give it a big service at the same time, because it is 25 years old. So there are, you know, the fuel tank needs changing and a few bits and pieces like that. And then it'll be rolled out and good as new. So
Yeah.
like I said, because the value's grown, that's something that we can do so that we don't necessarily restore the car. We keep it original, but we just improve the edges and, you know,
Yeah.
much like a thorough clean. We call it a birthday. In the
Birthday.
industry. Yeah, exactly.
What
And
about
then
this?
this is a great car. This is a CLK GTR. So
It's amazing.
in the 90s, you have the GT1 race series,
Yeah.
and the McClaren F1 went into that. The Porsche GT1 was born, and Mercedes came along with the CLK GTR and just wiped the floor.
I
of
mean,
the
this is the
competition.
birth of kind of the modern supercar.
This was it.
this
you know.
era.
And this was very much, because they had to build 25 homologation road car versions, this was very much a race car detuned for the road.
Yeah.
Ironically, Mercedes could not sell their 25 cars,
Really?
mainly because they were so expensive. So they were about €1 million back in 1999, which is a huge price considering, you know, most sort of top of the range Ferraris of like the F50 was about £300,000
Yeah.
or €350,000. So for the last 5 cars, they built 5 Roadsters plus one more, which is this car, which is the only one in right-hand drive. So we just recently carried out a major service on this car. Again, because of the age, we've split the engine, we've detailed it, we've replaced all the fuel lines, the seals, we've replaced the fuel tank. And as the final part of this stage, we're actually going to retrim the car because whilst it's very low mileage, it's been in a museum for a long time and lots of people were jumping in and out of it.
Oh, really?
So the interior is a bit tired, and it's also this fabulous purple, which isn't to everyone's taste. And this car was originally built for a very famous family from Asia who had a lot of cars. And so the new owner, the current owner, has decided that he would prefer to, whilst refreshing the interior, maybe change the color. So we're going to a very dark green with a played interior. So that sort of tartan, as people call it, but the played interior that you would see on a 300 SL Roadster from the 50s.
Yeah.
So it's going to look fantastic. It'll look really good against the grey. And so we're sending it partially stripped because the sills are integral to the interior. And in order to get to the parts, you have to do that. So we partially stripped it before it goes to a specialist trimmer to have that retrim work done.
Yeah, amazing. What did Mercedes do with the ones that didn't sell?
Well, they turned them into Roadsters, basically. So
Okay.
they built them as Roadsters. The first 20 were coupes, and then the last 5, plus this one, 6, were built as Roadsters. And they managed to get those cars sold. So they did finally meet that caveat of having to build 25 cars. Unlike Porsche, who I think said they built 25 cars, but I don't think they ever did. I think they built 19 or so.
They never fully assembled them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's great to see it with its clothes off like this. This is, you know, the inner workings of a racing car, and it's
So stunning.
yeah. And it always impresses me that these proper manufacturers, when they build cars like this, the finish and the detail is still to show quality. You know, if you look at this, we've not changed anything. This is how it would have been when it was new. So they really got what they needed to do.
Stunning. Yeah.
Well, let's wander through and I'll show you the rest of the workshops.
Yeah. The meticulous work that James and his team perform on these vintage cars is much more than a simple aesthetic makeover. In fact, when it comes to the art of restoration, their goal is nothing less than an attempt to restore a car to the pristine state in which it would originally have rolled off the factory line. If a component no longer exists, the mechanics here will actually recreate that part exactly as it would have originally been. Thank you.
So this is what we call our dirty bay.
Okay.
So where all the dirty work happens. And this is another really exciting part of a restoration, when the car comes in and it's fully stripped so that all the parts can be restored over, this is the start of its 2-year process, if you like.
So this is the most extensive work that you guys undertake here at DK, is the full restoration of a vintage automobile.
Yeah, I mean, shortly I'll show you a car that's at a slightly later stage, but this is of course going to be stripped right back to a bare shell. All the paint will come off, all the individual components will be removed from the car, and whilst it's being away and having the metalwork done and the paintwork done, all the individual components will be restored so that when it comes back, freshly painted, it can be assembled over a 5-month period, then road tested, then signed off and finished.
Yeah. And so what's the provenance of a vehicle like this? I mean, where did it come from and where does it go afterwards?
So this was a bit of a find, really. We're lucky to find a car like this for the client that we're doing it for. And it's a car that we sourced, we actually purchased and then sold to the new owner.
Okay.
And we've included a full restoration as part of the sale. And it was, it's part of our network that a friend of a friend of a friend said that they had a friend who had a car that he'd owned for 40 years. It's a right-hand drive car. So originally supplied to the UK, 275 short nose from 1965. Originally would have had 6 carburetors, which is quite a nice, rare specification. And he had bought it in England in about 1980 because the currency, the exchange rate was very favourable. So it was a lot cheaper than buying a car in Europe. And he drove it home, parked it up, and actually never drove the car after that. So it's just sat with him for 40 years unused.
No kidding.
A lot of people have said to us, it's a bit of a shame to restore it because it's got this patinated state. But my argument is, it needs restoration. It's not in a running state. The inner wheel arches are very rusty, so it's not roadworthy. And it's not original. The car during its life, probably in the early 70s, had a repaint, had a few bits and pieces changed. The steering wheel is wrong. There are a few details that are incorrect on the car. So we're going to return it back to its original factory specification, which was Rosso Rubino, which is a very dark red with the black interior, and make it, ready to be used and enjoyed by the owner for another 40 years.
Wow, that's amazing. How many of these will you do a year? Or how many do you work on concurrently?
So any one time.
It's a massive project. I imagine you can only handle so many.
This will take 18 to 24 months. So any one time we'll have something between 6 and 10 cars having a job of this size. So at this point in time, we've just finished a very similar car, which we took to Pebble Beach this summer. And we have a 250 Lusso that's at the trim shop at the moment. We're obviously starting this. We've got a Daytona. We've got 2 Jaguar D-types that we're restoring, an Atalanta, which is a pre-war English-built car with a Lincoln Zephyr V12 engine, and a modern Porsche GT1 that had a fire, and an F40. We've got plenty going on at the moment.
Yeah, incredible. Wow. Here we go. It'd be interesting to see this in 2 years' time.
Yeah, it'd be great to have you back and take you for a ride in it when it's done.
Amazing.
Okay, well, I'll show you the rest of the workshop.
Thank you.
After you.
More Ferraris. This is amazing.
Yeah, if you look across the workshop, you'll see the typical split. It's about 80% Ferrari and then other cars. And this leads me on to this Jaguar D-type. So again, it's been a bit Jaguar heavy today.
Yeah.
It is 80% Ferrari.
Yeah.
But this is a very, very important Jaguar D-type that we're restoring. If that car that we looked at earlier on is one of the best, this is certainly also one of the best and in the top 5, both of those cars.
Yeah. Once you're done with it, it will be.
Absolutely, but already it is in terms of its originality and its significance historically. It's one of the very first cars, so it has an all-aluminium chassis, which only the very early cars had. And in fact, it's the first Jaguar D-type to ever win a race.
Really?
So it's, very early, 1954, unlike the other car, which is 1956. And we're in the middle of a full restoration. It's actually quite a sensitive restoration because the car is extremely original. Although over the years it had been restored before, so the paint's fresh. It's been back to a bare tub.
Yeah.
But it's having the full restoration, if you like.
So whenever you say sensitive restoration, what does that mean?
So in terms of this particular car, when it went back to a bare shell, on other cars you may replace some metalwork because the shape isn't quite correct, because the fit and finish of the panels isn't quite correct. But for example, on this car, the bonnet, it isn't symmetrical. The lights and the grille are not perfectly in the middle, but we left that because that's how it's always been. And for such a significant race car, in comparison to the other 3 or so prototype cars like this one that exist, when we inspected those cars for reference for this restoration, we soon realized how correct and original this car is. So there are little repairs and bits and pieces across the tub from the years of racing that it's had, which one could be tempted to perfect and put back to exactly as it was when it left the factory, whereas we've left it, maybe improved its integrity, but left it because it tells a story. So, you know, little worlds, extra rivets here and there, dents, things like that.
Yeah.
So this is a car that we will have completed in the next 6 months or so, and we will show all over the world, and it'll be quite a big deal. And it's been a real honour and privilege for us to be entrusted with the restoration of this car because, like I said, it's one of the most important D-types in existence.
Yeah, that's incredible.
The whole idea of a restoration is to improve the car, is to also increase the longevity of its life, you know, and to make sure this car is around for another, you know, 60, 70 years.
Yeah, it's true active preservation.
Exactly. And if you just left it, especially this car the way it was, you know, it was deep down, it was a very original, correct car. It just had a life that needed a few things bringing back and certain, you know, hidden areas reprotecting, refinishing. And it's going to be fantastic when it's done.
Yeah. How much longer?
About 6 months.
6 months.
6 months in terms of when it's absolutely signed off, road tested, everything snagged, and, you know, finished to perfection for that. And then behind us, you see the variety of other cars that we have in the workshop. You know, again, we're talking about the F cars, so F40 in for a big service, 355 Challenge race car, 575 road car. At the far end, 288 GTO having a restoration, 275 GTB Dino, another Jaguar D-Type being restored. That shows you there's so much going on here.
Just, I mean, the variety at this level is incredible.
And it's actually surprising, you know, so many times I discuss and tell people that this business is unique in the world, you know, where not only will you find all the different services that we provide, but to the level at which we provide them. So most restoration shops will do restoration and occasional service and occasional sales. You know, we sell the best cars in the world. We sell over 100 cars a year. We restore the best cars in the world. And we also service the best cars in the world. And we store them. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, do you ever walk in to work and just, you know, have trouble believing that all these incredible vehicles are assembled right here?
Definitely. And also, you know, when you get to be around an important car, you know, certainly when the long-nosed D-Type turned up the other day, it was a real pinch myself moment to think, wow, that is, you know, seriously significant car. It's back here. We've handled the sale of this. You're very proud of it. And when we go to the storage facility later on, I'll show you another one of those cars, which is, for me, as a Ferrari lover, was an absolute pinch yourself moment to have that car in our care.
Incredible. With so many beautiful classic cars on show, it's easy to forget just how far the team here go to restore each one of these individual works of art to their former glory. The process is definitely not just a question of raising the hood for a quick tune-up. By rebuilding these cars from the ground up, James and his team get to develop a deep understanding of each car and its racing qualities, a degree of knowledge way beyond that which would otherwise be possible. Just keeps on going and going and going.
Yes, another one of our showrooms. So we've got 5 different showrooms. And this one in here, we have, you know, again, more cars for sale, but also a few examples of restoration projects.
Okay.
So behind you here, we have this 625 TF, which is a car that was built in the early 1950s by Ferrari and went to Venezuela in the 50s and has been there ever since until last year.
So this is like a barnyard car?
It's what they call a barn find.
Barn find,
Exactly.
Barn
and
find.
Having lived in Venezuela, it's had quite a life. So the body's not the original. It's been completely messed around with.
So is half of this
so there will be
not
elements
original
to it, but what's underneath is the original car.
Okay.
And eventually we will start with the restoration of this, but we're working closely with the Ferrari factory to make sure that we do it in the right way that they're happy with, so that they will certify it and authenticate it at the end. So really exciting projects to have a car like that. And then here we have a long wheelbase 250 Ferrari. So this car's body was very rusty many years ago and removed. And we built this up for a design museum exhibition in London called Ferrari Under the Skin. So it's not only a reflection of what a 50s Ferrari looks like under the skin, but it's also a reflection of our restoration work and as the cars came together, if the body wasn't on the car, what you'd see underneath. So it's really interesting to see the way they are. And people often comment that, you know, there's not much to it, but actually, in fact, if you look at any other 50s car, it's a very comprehensive and sturdy and strong chassis, which is why Ferrari was such a successful brand racing, especially in the 50s and early 60s, is because their chassis frames were strong and their engine was strong. So the cars were reliable because the race courses were bumpy, not easy, not kind on the cars. They were, and today in historic racing, all the circuits are very well surfaced, smooth. So you'll see like a little Lotus winning the race where in period it would have been a Ferrari because the Lotus might have been faster over a lap, but couldn't put together all the laps where the Ferrari could. Today it's sort of a role reversal. Yeah,
that's interesting. Especially to see that, kind of looking back retrospectively, kind of the evolution of those vehicles. When you look at the quality and the craftsmanship and the tradition, of course, three things very important to this channel. Seeing that in these vehicles is incredible, but then seeing it in the restoration work and the way that you approach that is equally astounding.
And I think, touching on something you said just there, there's a real Italian flair to the way this is done. So, if we just look at the gearbox, the ribbed casing of the gearbox, it's not just functional, it looks pretty. The way in which it's designed, everything is, very in tune with being fashionable and looking good and looking pretty, which is why, under the skin, this car looks so, almost perfect and interesting, and everything is well formed and everything looks kind of in place. Whereas I think a lot of cars, you'd look underneath the skin and see something that was that would surprise you much more. It's a bit of a mess.
Thinking of like just the tailoring tradition, the difference between the Italian and the British tailoring is a fundamental different mindset. Right?
Absolutely.
I guess that's reflected everywhere kind of across those two cultures.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot more thought, I think, that goes into behind the scenes here, which no one would ever see, but...
Will the body go back on this vehicle at some point?
Eventually this will be rebodied. It will have to have a new body, and it will be a California Spyder, so an open body.
And is it possible to just acquire the bodies?
No, that will have to be made.
Made, okay.
Yeah, made
so
from
it won't
scratch.
be an original body then?
Yeah. It's possible you might find an original body that's been removed from a car at some point for some reason, but most likely this car will have a new body on it.
Yeah.
Which is okay because it's keeping the car alive. It won't be as pure as the matching numbers engine, original chassis, original body car. It'll be a 4/5 car if you like, but it's still better than nothing. And it's still a Ferrari, exactly.
Still a Ferrari. What about this right here?
So this here is an F40 that had a fire, and we're in the middle of restoring that. But again, it's at a key point where it's ideal for demonstration. So we've built it up as a display chassis with the engine and gearbox fully rebuilt and the front suspension on it. And we've had it at a few shows, and later on this year we're going to carry on with the rest of the project.
Yeah.
But something really special that I want to show you in the corner there.
I see it peeking above the Porsche. Or let's go look at that.
Let's go have a look.
Wow, look at this. What a beautiful, iconic supercar.
And of course, British.
Yeah, this is of my childhood. I think I was, just coming into my teen years whenever this first came out. I've never seen one of these in the person.
Well, before we come on to that, let's just have a quick look at this 250 short wheelbase.
Not to ignore the Ferrari.
So I just wanted to show you a car that is very much an example of what we do in terms of start to finish service. So this car was sold by us to the previous owner, and then we started a full restoration for him a few years later. It was a very original car. Halfway through the restoration, he decided he wanted to sell the car, so we bought it from him, went to finish the restoration, and just before it was finished, sold it to the current owner. And so it's been finished for about a year, but I just, in terms of those cars that you saw sort of midway through restoration and being started, just to show you how they end up.
Oh, gosh, it's got to be better than new. This is amazing. You can really see why people fell in love with Ferraris. This is a sexy car.
The finish of a Ferrari in the 60s, especially a road car, was just so far ahead of everyone else. And people often say, oh, it's over-restored and, like you say, better than new. It probably is better than new, but, again, to sort of echo, it's a combination of the best quality finishes of various cars all into one. This finish would have been possible had the right guy been on the job for long enough.
Yeah.
The problem was they didn't have long enough to build the cars. I'll show you under the bonnet as well. So this car is, very much a road car, but to competition specifications. So it has these open carburetors with the cold air tray, high lift camshafts. But it's a real work of art. And again, coming back to what we were saying about the rolling chassis over there, it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Even actually a Lamborghini Miura of the same sort of period, look under the bonnet, it's a mess.
Yeah.
A Ferrari was just beautiful.
Immaculate.
Just the color combinations and the details and the features and the way everything worked. It's very purposeful, but yeah.
Yeah. A vehicle like this, it's so clean under the hood. I can't even imagine it being started or run.
it all comes down to maintenance.
Yeah.
So these cars, they can be used for thousands of miles, and as long as they're well maintained, they should present as well as this car does in 20 years' time. And we have lots of cars around us that we've restored 20, 30 years ago that still today, even though they've done lots of mileage, look as good as this car because they're properly maintained. But we should move on to the British car.
Yeah.
So, okay, so on to the McLaren.
He even has this sound. Wow. I mean, what an iconic car. I mean, this really put Britain back on the map as far as supercars were concerned.
For sure. Central driving position, naturally aspirated V12, lightweight, no driver aids, 3-seater, of course. You know, all these little features that just added up to this amazing car, which was only ever supposed to be a road car, sorry. But the amazing thing is that someone said, why don't we go racing with it? Because it fits the GT1 rules. And we looked at, some other cars earlier. And then they turned it into a race car, and first time out at Le Mans, 1995, it won overall, which was just a dream come true.
It dominated, didn't it?
And today, that is why it has become pretty much the second most desirable car in the world after a 250 GTO is a McLaren F1. There are 64 of them. Prices are well into the 20s in terms of $1 million. And we're very lucky to have this car living here with us.
Wow, this is a beauty. Look at that. God, it's immaculate inside.
And everything's very simple about it. It's
so pure.
Yeah, nothing was over-engineered, overthought, but very well designed, very well thought out. It was just,
totally deliberate. And the E and the L right here, what is?
So this one's for the engine bay, one's for the luggage compartment. So the beauty of the car as well is that both sides, it had two generous, sort of
very generous,
15-litre, so 30 litres in total of luggage space.
Yeah. And I remember this one. The CD players and the bonnet in the front.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Can we take a look at the engine?
Of course, to see the gold. That's what everyone always wants to see, is the gold foil. So,
wow.
Here's the engine bay, and then this is the gold foil that everyone always looks at.
Of course. How beautiful is that?
Yeah.
It's got the bling.
And you can be forgiven for thinking it's a gimmick. It's got a real purpose.
Yeah.
It's got a real purpose.
They took the idea from the space shuttle, right?
Of course.
Because weren't they having trouble with the exhaust melting the panel?
Indeed.
Wow, this is a total marvel. Wow, incredible. And this is just hanging out with the rest of the cars.
This is, again, another example of a car that we sourced for a client. Mm-hmm. We advised him on, what next to spend some money on, and so it's here, ready to be used and enjoyed when he has time to.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we look after it and enjoy showing people like yourself.
Yeah, make sure it's
such a special car.
Keep it looking beautiful. Gosh, what an incredible vehicle. You've driven it?
Yes, yeah. They're an interesting car because they are really rewarding as a driver. It's got no power steering. It's a rifle bolt gearbox mechanism. But it's also not as easy to drive as you'd expect. It has this reputation for being, a phenomenal car. But you have to really think about it. You have to have your wits about you. You have to, especially if you start driving it quite quickly. But overall, it's just a fabulous car.
Who was the British comedian that put his in the ditch?
Rowan Atkinson.
Yes, Rowan Atkinson.
Yeah. So, fair play to him. He did the mileage in the car, so at some point,
it's gonna happen.
Laws of probability.
Yeah. If you're going to have a daily driver and you could drive anything, why not make it in the
exactly.
F1?
Okay, well, I'll lead you on to our next showroom.
It keeps on going. Wow. There's a lot of red in this room.
Indeed. Yeah, some would say that I've saved the best till last.
Yeah.
But so we've just had a wander through our other showrooms, so our prestige showrooms and our other blue chip showrooms. So this is the fifth and last of all of those. And
you're definitely saving the best for last.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is, again, a real example of not only the kind of cars that we specialize in, but the particular period as well, which really, 60s Ferrari is or 50s and 60s Ferrari is really where the business was, founded and built up. And if you go on the internet and look at the various websites that document the history of these cars, you'll see David Cottingham, my father, or DK Engineering featuring in the history of a lot of all these different cars. And these cars all are of a collection that we've helped build and we curate at the moment, and we have restored all of the cars here. So, it's quite a lineup that we're
quite a suite of Ferraris. So this is all one owner's collection.
Yes.
It's amazing. Wow.
Yes.
I mean, this is as blue chip as it gets.
Indeed.
So what do we have? I mean, just kind of walk me through them real quickly.
So starting from this end, we have a 250 LM. So the 250 LM was the last Ferrari to win Le Mans overall in 1965. It was the car that was designed, and famously, Enzo Ferrari tried to trick the FIA to say that it was a GT, hence it was called a 250 LM. But in fact, it should have been called a 275 LM. It was a space frame chassis. It was a completely all new car. It was a prototype. So that wasn't allowed. So it wasn't allowed to run as a GT, but a 250 LM was the last Ferrari to win Le Mans. This is a car that we have actually owned in the past, and then was sold to the USA. We bought it back on behalf of the owner in 2015, and we embarked upon a 2-year restoration just to bring it back to perfection and original state. And again, of the 32 250 LMs, they have very hard racing lives generally. There are only 7 cars that can truly say they are matching numbers throughout, i.e. original body, chassis, engine and gearbox. This is one of those 7. Between a 250 LM and a 250 short wheelbase would have been a 250 GTO. Unfortunately, there isn't one in this collection yet. But you never know. Well. But a 250 short wheelbase, this is a 1961, what they call a CFAC hot rod. So the 250 short wheelbase was built over a 2-year period. 1960 cars, like the car that we had a look at in the other showroom that we restored, then 1961 cars, and then the competition versions like this had an aluminium body. So this is the ultimate competition 250 short wheelbase, if you like. And it looks almost identical to the road car, except it has an outside fuel filler. It has a slightly more aggressive attitude to it. It has bigger carburetors. And very sought after car. Then if you wanted a convertible Ferrari, most people would argue that a short wheelbase 250 California Spyder with covered headlights is the one to have. There are approximately 20 of those, and again, this is one of the 20, and a car, again, that we have totally restored. And, I think you'll agree, that whilst the roof's up, because we don't like to let the material shrink, but even with the roof up, it's a very, very pretty car, and with the roof down, it's, for me, hands down, the most desirable car. Some people would argue that a 275 Nart Spyder is more desirable because it's rarer, so it's more expensive. But I think this is it for me. 250.
It makes you want to go to Italy, the Riviera.
Then finally, this 14 Louvre. So if you look on the rear sail panel, it has those 14 vents. It's 14 Louvre at 250 Tour de France, which is a late 50s built GT competition Ferrari with an aluminium body again. And these are the sorts of cars that were driven to the racetrack, raced, and then driven home. And this particular car was owned by Walt Disney when it was a few years old.
Really?
And it was in the film Herbie, the Love Bug.
Was it? Okay.
So Herbie sort of falls in love with the baddie's car.
Yeah.
And the baddie drives this very Tour de France. And actually a car that's very close to my heart, because we, again, a friend of the family owned this car for about 30 years in a dismantled state, waiting to restore it. We bought it in the early 90s and fully restored it. And my father famously raced it on a Saturday, cleaned it up that evening and took it to a concours show and won the concours show the next day overall with the car. But sadly, in the late 90s, he sold it to fund our school fees.
Yeah.
So,
legendary car.
And back then it was $600,000. In 2007 or 8, when I just finished university, I was at an auction in America with him. The same car sold for $6 million. So only 10 years later.
Expensive education.
And it's exactly what he said to me. He turned to me and he said, well, that's your education, cost $5.4 million. I was like, okay, fine. But later on in 2013, I purchased that car for this collection on behalf of the client. And again, even though we'd restored it in the 90s, it had been quite heavily used, doing lots of rallies and events. So we re-restored it and refreshed it. And we're lucky enough to look after the entire collection.
I can only imagine what it sounds like.
Yes, and these earlier Ferrari 250s, they have a very distinct sort of higher pitched sound to them because they have a thinner exhaust, and it's a lovely, lovely car to drive.
It's like a symphony. Wow.
And then behind you here, we've got 275 GTB short nose. So very similar to the car that we saw at the office. It's in the workshops that's being fully restored. Then this is another right-hand drive 250 short wheelbase, just like the car that we had a look at in the other showroom that we restored last year. And then finally, a really special car, which is, extremely rare, extremely original, and a true competition Ferrari. This is a 365 GTB4 Daytona competition. So it's one of only 15 Daytonas that was built by the factory to competition specification. This car raced at Spa in 1973, as well as at Le Mans in the 24 hours, and finished. And then it came back to the UK later on. It led quite a quiet life. It was purchased by a gentleman in 1975 who used it very sparingly, and it actually lived with us from 1994 until now. And from 1994 until 2015, it was in the corner of one of our buildings, under a cover, unused. And the opportunity came for us to buy it in 2015, so we bought it from that friend. So he'd had it since the mid-70s, and we've owned it ever since, and we regularly use it and enjoy it. I've done a rally in Italy with it with my father. When my wife and I, before we were married, we did a make or break rally in it, where we did a 3-day competitive rally together. And the deal was that if we were still talking at the end, that we'd get married still. And we were still talking, and we are married, and we're still married. Yeah, exactly. And this is a great car, because it's a true race car that you can drive on the road. And it's pretty much the last time Ferrari built a car like that. After that, the competition cars that replaced these, they were true race cars. They weren't road cars. But this is a road car, and this is the car that I will take to Goodwood for the weekend.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we're going to drive up in. That's pretty exciting.
Well, I tell you what. I mean, perhaps you should come for a ride with me, because we're going to go see the storage facility. So should we jump in?
Let's do it.
Seems like a good idea. So the final arm of the business, this is our storage facility. Grown over the last 15 years, if you like. We have in total in our care now close to 500 cars.
No kidding.
Yeah, that includes one collection for one client that's 100 cars on its own. And in this particular building, which is our main storage facility, we have 160 cars. And we're actually adding another 3 buildings with 2 floors in the next month. It's going to be completed. That'll be capacity for another 160 cars again.
Amazing.
And the people often ask, why do we have all these cars in our care? And generally, it's a combination of, in the UK, we're short of space. So a lot of people don't have the space for the cars at home. So we might rotate their collection. So say they have 2 spaces at home, but 10 cars, we'll have 8 here. And we rotate them for them, whether they come to us to collect it or we deliver it to them. And a lot of overseas clients as well, because Europe, and in particular the UK, is really the hub for the world of experts in restoring and preparing cars, and like you've seen already today. And a lot of the best events in the world are based in Europe. So we provide the service whereby someone can simply give us some notice, and we'll make sure the car's ready and delivered to wherever they want it to. And post-event, we will re-prepare the car and put it back in storage safely.
Amazing.
So this is our ground floor. And of course, most of the cars, for the privacy of the clients, are covered up. But we have got something really special upstairs, which I did hint towards earlier on, so we can go have a look at that.
Yeah. Okay, let's do
it. Let's go.
Oh, this is incredible. I've never seen so much red. My heart is bleeding here.
If you count the rear spoilers as well, it's at 10 F40s.
Incredible.
So I wanted to show you a really special car, but first of all, on our way there, this is the ex-Gianni Agnelli Testarossa Spyder with his Torino number plate with 50 G.
Yeah, that's right.
So he was, obviously...
I mean, an icon, an Italian icon.
Absolute icon. And this was the only Testarossa Spyder. And believe it or not, it had what's called a Valero clutch, which is a clutchless manual gearbox because he had a bad left leg. And that's
what a special car.
One of very...
Only to be driven in Italian suits.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And it's one of many special cars that are under the covers in here, and obviously we won't reveal them all, but I've got to show you this one because it's probably the most significant car you might ever see. So let's go have a look.
Well, this looks amazing, but I have to confess, I don't even really know what I'm looking at.
So if someone asked me what's the most significant Ferrari in existence, I think this is it. This is the Ferrari that put Ferrari on the map in terms of a manufacturer. And 1949, of course, they were 2 years old. People knew who Enzo Ferrari was because he'd run the Scuderia Ferrari Works Alfa Romeo racing team. Yeah. But after the Second World War, he'd set up his own business, Ferrari. And this car went in 1949 to not only win the Mille Miglia overall, which was at the time was the most famous road race, but also the Le Mans 24 Hours, which was then and still is the most famous endurance race in the world. It is the only car in existence to have done that. It is the only Ferrari to have done that, and it is the first Ferrari to have won the Mille Miglia and Le Mans. So with those items combined, it's pretty much...
So if you're looking for the racing pedigree, I mean, this is the apex car.
If you're thinking about the start point of Ferrari's competition history with success, if you think about the car with the two best racing results of any Ferrari, if you think about one of the most famous stories at Le Mans especially, this is the Ferrari. And the reason I reference that is because Luigi Chinetti, who is from New York, who really convinced Enzo Ferrari to build road cars as well as race cars, who was a customer of his and was the first importer and distributor of Ferrari in the USA. He actually drove this car at Le Mans in '49 with Lord Selsdon, who was the owner. Okay. Lord Selsdon was very unwell. So Luigi went on to actually drive the car for 23 hours and 40 minutes of the 24 hours when they won at the age of 50. Which is incredible. I mean, I couldn't do that today.
Because that's why it's a team of two drivers, is because it's so physically taxing.
Exactly. And today you'd have three drivers. Back then they had two drivers, and you look at the lights they had, and bearing in mind that it wasn't a smooth paved road, it was quite a rough course. And he drove the car for 23 hours and 40 minutes of the 24 hours, which is just remarkable. So not only coupled with those two great race results, with that story, this is the car. And so the iconic number 22 Ferrari, this is, a really famous car.
Has this ever gone up to auction?
No, it's not been auctioned. It was owned by the same gentleman for about the last 30 years, who passed away a number of years ago and left his entire collection to his wife. And she still actively shows and exhibits the cars and campaigns them, at various concours events. They're not raced, but they have a very, very serious collection of not only Ferraris, lots of pre-war limousine type cars, Bentleys, Rolls-Royce Ghosts, those sorts of things. And 4 years ago, we were lucky enough to receive this car into our care so that she could tour the European concours scene. Really? So the car has been to a number of significant events across Europe, and we've looked after it. So the car's lived with us for 4 years, so we've had it at various different locations in the business. It was in our handover bay for a long time. It was in one of the showrooms for a long time. It's here at the storage facility at the moment. But she very kindly lets us show people the car because she's of the opinion that the car should be appreciated and seen. Yeah. And whilst it's over here in Europe, here it is. And we are very grateful. And of course, it's a huge honour and privilege that the most significant Ferrari in the world should be entrusted to DK Engineering during its time in Europe.
Literally the gemstone of the collection.
Indeed.
Wow, what an incredible business. I mean, it's amazing just the scope. I mean, not only of the different aspects of the total life of a vehicle that you guys touch, but the scope and breadth of the number of different vehicles that you and the entire DK firm, has their care over. So wow, well, this is unbelievable. I have to say, I'm even more excited about heading off to Goodwood tomorrow. And I just look forward to continuing to be astounded.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, I think you're going to have an amazing time. When we're at Goodwood, I'll have to have a little look around the paddock with you and point out some significant cars and explain to you the significance of them. Mainly the Ferraris, of course, because in my opinion, they're the best.
Yeah.
And look forward to it.
Yeah. James,
thank you so much
for opening up the doors to this incredible facility.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate you coming.
Well, I've been thinking about the revival. I've got some ideas for you to review.
For me, it's always important to have something that works for every part of the occasion. So it's not only the getting there and being in the paddock, but it's also driving old cars, you know.
Well, that's what I've come up with then. There's this one here.
Really appropriate as well for Goodwood, I think.
I think so.
Hey James.
Alex, how are you?
Good to see you.
And you?